do so of heart disease.
Can anything be done about this?
Plenty. Don't smoke, watch your weight, your cholesterol, your blood pressure. It's a tough battle, Sam.
We've come through tough battles before.
The American Heart Association.
I like your attitude.
We're fighting for your life.
This is your TV station, Fine TV. From ABC News. This week with David Brinkley. Now from our Washington headquarters, here's David Brinkley.
At the moment, the only defense against AIDS is to avoid catching it. Once you have it, it appears to be 100% fatal. When the bubonic plague killed half to three-fourths of the population of Europe and Asia in the 14th century, people did not know what the disease was or how to avoid it. With AIDS, we do know. We know what it is and we know how it is spread, but we do not know how to cure it. In time, without some progress, the result could be disaster. Well, is there any progress? Any hope of a cure in sight? When might there be? We'll ask today's guests. Dr. Anthony S. Fauci, Director of the Institute of Infectious Disease, National Institutes of Health. Representative Henry Waxman, Democrat, California, Chairman of a Subcommittee on Health and Environment. Faye Wattleton, President, Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Connaught Marshner of the Child and Family Protection Institute. And Dr. Thomas Vernon, Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Health. Some background on a growing danger to the public health from our man Jack Smith, and our discussion here with George Will, Sam Donaldson, and Bob Maynard, all here on our Sunday program. First, a little news. The New York Times reports today the Reagan administration set up its own separate operation to run private, secret foreign policy projects. It grew out of a public agency called Project Democracy, but in recent years developed its own apparatus, including its own communications, secret operators, its own ships, airplanes, bank accounts. At the head of it, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. In Beirut, a British doctor says the Palestinians held in a refugee camp are now dying of starvation because the Shiite Muslim militiamen surrounding the camp will not allow food to be sent in. We'll be back with all the rest of today's program in a moment.
This week with David Brinkley, brought to you by IC Industries, making the most of business opportunities. And by General Electric. At GE, we bring good things to life.
GE, we stay as new as you do. GE, so you can live the way you want to. We know the way you love to live. We're GE, and this is what we give. We give you time to give the children time. Let them see the light, and lights to life, the light to see you through. Songs to teach them they belong. You're there to make them strong. This is the life for you. Time to watch them when they try, to be there when they cry, to find the answer when they ask you why. Smile, we stay as new as you. We'll always be GE. We bring good things to life.
There is some evidence that in spite of the danger, and the danger is death, most Americans are living their lives about as they did before AIDS was ever heard of. Perhaps many of them think it is just more media hype, just another sensation intended to scare them, and likely in time to just go away. But many people continued smoking long after it was proved to be deadly. And before we question today's guests, here's some background and some of the current thinking in the medical community from Jack Smith. Jack?
David, 29,000 Americans have contracted AIDS since it first surfaced in the U.S. 6 years ago. More than half have died, and the number getting the fatal disease is roughly doubling each year. More alarming, it's no longer confined to homosexuals. It's now spreading among heterosexual men and women. More than 1,000 have it, 4% of the total, and the number's growing fast.
Within 4 to 5 years, we will be seeing a large number of AIDS cases among individuals who have no other known risk factor other than being heterosexually active.
AIDS is a worldwide epidemic, but has progressed furthest in Africa. U.S. health officials are watching it there with mounting apprehension. 50,000 have already died, men and women, and by the year 2000, it's estimated some Central African nations may lose 1/4 of their populations.
The same phenomenon can occur in the United States if we're not careful. It may take us 10 years to get to that situation, but it can happen.
We're going to have several 100,000 people dying of AIDS in this country, because we know already that we have, at the very least, 1.5 million or 2 million people infected.
Up to 50% of those infected with the AIDS virus get the disease, but the vast majority don't know they're infected since it doesn't show, and that's how it spreads.
One of the ways you can think about it is when you go to bed with someone, you may possibly be going to bed with all the people they went to bed with before.
Some AIDS victims have gotten symptomatic relief from a recent drug called AZT, but an actual remedy is not expected for at least 10 to 15 years.
There's no cure, no vaccines. There's no other way of preventing the transmission other than safe sex.
Health professionals are urging men and women to be less promiscuous, to know their partners, and to use condoms. Safe sex, and it's catching on. Last weekend in New York State, a minister handed out condoms during his sermon. And in many parts of the country, as Valentine's Day approached, groups were out promoting the contraceptive. Even Dr. C. Everett Koop, the U.S. Surgeon General, known for his conservative views, recently urged a massive public education effort, including sex education from the 3rd grade on and the advertising of condoms on TV.
Advertising, I think, therefore, is necessary in reference to condoms and would have a positive public health benefit.
The condoms I buy are called lifestyles.
Most local TV stations don't permit condom ads like these, nor do the networks, saying they'd offend the moral beliefs of many viewers. Congressman Henry Waxman this week called that hypocritical priggishness.
While portraying thousands of sexual encounters each year in programming, and while marketing thousands of products using sex appeal, television is unwilling to give the life-saving information about safe sex and condoms.
But Waxman's conservative colleagues thought teaching young people about safe sex would encourage promiscuity.
What I'm concerned about is that we're going to move simply to a message that says, hey, everybody has sex. We all know that. Just make sure you use condoms and then there'll be no problems.
Public health officials are considering another controversial approach, testing people when they apply for a marriage license, are hospitalized, get pregnant. Astonishingly, it isn't done. Few states, for instance, even offer optional AIDS screening at their VD clinics. Too few takers.
If it gets anywhere between you, outside of you, and the doctor that has tested you, you will be discriminated against.
James McLaurin, who is dying of AIDS, lost not only his friends, but also his job and his insurance. Without convincing guarantees of confidentiality, say critics, mandatory testing would only make matters worse by driving AIDS victims underground.
To keep premiums fair, insurance companies must be allowed to test for the risk of AIDS.
Insurance firms are also asserting the right to screen out applicants who test positive. Since half who do never get the disease, it hardly seems fair. But without testing, insurers say they face huge losses. A dilemma, since in 4 short years, the cost of caring for AIDS patients nationwide could reach $16 billion.
After the patient can no longer pay, the question is who will pay.
In a recent poll, 92% of Americans said that AIDS had not affected the way they conducted their lives. Predictions of a sexual counter-revolution have not yet come true. Until they do, or until a cure is found, the disease will continue to spread, and there is no release from its grip except death, as James McLaurin knows all too well.
By not protecting yourself, you're killing yourself, because that's what's happening to me. I am dying.
Thank you, Jack. Coming next, Dr. Anthony S. Fauci, Director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases at the National Institutes of Health, And shortly, Faye Wattleton, president of the Planned Parenthood Federation, and Connaught Marshner of the Child and Family Protection Institute, Dr. Thomas Vernon, director of the Colorado Department of Health, and Representative Henry Waxman, California, chairman of a subcommittee on health. In a moment.
I see you've got homework, too.
Never ends.
Looks like it was quite a project.
Have a look.
Thanks. Impressive. I wish we could do work like this. But we have to crank them out every week.
So do we.
We can afford to farm them out. We have to do them on our computer.
So do we.
You did that on the computer? What kind of computer?
Every hour, more than 7,000 aircraft touch down on runways around the world. IC Industries is there. Our aerospace company, A.I.D.S, produces landing gear and flight controls for most of the free world's aircraft. IC Industries. This year, Americans will say I love you with over 200 million boxes of chocolates. IC Industries is there. Our food company, Pet, makes the Whitman Sampler, a favorite of America's sweethearts. IC Industries.
Try to imagine surgery performed without anesthesia, without sutures, even without a scalpel. This is the CT scanner by GE, a remarkable machine that lets doctors explore the human body without a single incision, showing clearly intricate details of the human anatomy, which until now could only be seen through conventional surgery.
That's it? That's it. I'm okay.
Oh, great. GE, we bring good things to life.
Electroshock therapy may not be what you think it is, often portrayed as gruesome and frightening. Dr. Tim Johnson will report that it can be humane. It need not require hospitalization, and it can be effective in treating depression. Monday on World News Tonight.
Dr. Fauci, thank you very much for coming in today.
Good to be here.
Pleased to have you with us. Here in the studio are George Will of ABC News and Sam Donaldson, ABC News White House correspondent. Now, Dr. Fauci, as you will recall, you were here about, what, a year ago?
About a year and a half ago.
What is, on the same topic, problem with AIDS, what progress have we made since then?
Well, considerable progress. Since the last time I was here, there's been at least one and now a couple of drugs coming along that have been identified that have activity against the AIDS virus. One of them has been tested and shown over a limited period of time, measured in months, to prolong the life of patients who have AIDS and pneumocystis carotidae pneumonia. That drug is now being distributed to people who fall within that category, and there are a number of studies being conducted or planned that'll test that drug in larger numbers of patients.
What drug is that?
AZT, azidothymidine. There are a number of others that are in various stages of testing and development. So that, I think, is a very important advance. With regard to the vaccine development, now that we've been able, by recombinant DNA technology, to get various components of the virus, what we call subunits, to test in small animals and then hopefully in primates, chimps, or what have you, to determine safety and whether or not they induce a protective response, then you'll wind up having first phases of testing of vaccines.
By what standards or what principle is AZT denied to anyone who has AIDS now? I mean, how can you deny a drug to someone who's terminally ill?
Well, the drug has been shown to be effective to the point of being worth the risk-benefit ratio in a particular group of individuals who have AIDS with pneumocystis carotidae pneumonia. It has not shown to be effective or safe in a variety of other situations.
What's safe to someone dying?
Well, when you talk about safe to someone dying, there are a number of points to be considered. First of all, the drug right now and its availability is not totally available where there are unlimited quantities. So the decision has been made to make the drug available to individuals where you might have at least a chance of doing some good.
What do we know about the so-called breakout of this disease into the general heterosexual population? My reading of the statistics is that among heterosexuals who are not drug users and who are not having sex with bisexual men or women who've had these other habits, normal heterosexual population, that the rate of AIDS is constant. It is not exploding. Is that the case?
That's not correct. No. The percentage of individuals who have gotten AIDS by heterosexual transmission is about 4% now.
It is projected that that number will go up in 1991 to about 10%.
It's the projections I'm talking about, though, because this is a behaviorally based disease. If we change our behavior, and education and programs like this should help, then the projections are wrong. On what are we basing these projections on? The assumption of no behavior modification based on information?
Well, the behavioral modification based on the information really itself is going to be a projection. We're not sure whether or not behavioral modification techniques of education or what have you will in fact have people change their behavior in a sexual sphere. Hopefully it will. If it does, then I think you're not going to see that fulminant spread. AIDS doesn't spread this way all the time. It will spread like this and then go up like that. That's what happened in the homosexual population. There were very, very few cases while individuals were infecting each other. There was a big buildup of infected individuals, but a very gradual buildup of disease. Only a few years later did you see that fulminant increase in disease.
How many infected heterosexuals are there?
Right now, it's unclear. It's unclear. We know that there are approximately 1 to 1.5 million people in this country infected with the virus. The relative proportion of heterosexual versus homosexual is unclear. Obviously, most of them at this point in time would be homosexuals or IV drug abusers. But if you look at other countries, for example, in Africa, it's very clear that not only is there a great deal of infection among the heterosexual population, but that's the way the virus is predominantly spread. And there's no reason why that won't take place in this country unless we have that behavior.
I want to check on some of the things we know and don't know about it. Okay. You said that's the way the virus is predominantly spread.
Right.
Are there other ways of spreading it? People in our country still believe that perhaps by casual contact you can get AIDS.
Again, with biology, you never say 100%, but the evidence that this is not spread casually is overwhelming scientifically from a number of very good studies. The evidence is really overwhelming that it's not spread casually.
There are still people who don't want children who have AIDS to go to school with their children.
Again, the same situation. If you look at household contacts of people with AIDS, if you look at healthcare providers who come into contact with people with AIDS, there's no evidence at all that it's spread that way.
Now, some people are pushing the use of condoms and education for the use of condoms as a way of preventing AIDS. Is that 100% effective?
Again, you can't say 100% when you're talking biology, but first of all, in the test tube situation, it's been shown that the virus does not penetrate a condom. And there's just been 2 recent studies, about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, which showed that in situations in which sexual partners of individuals who were infected with the virus used a condom or vice versa, that there was a remarkably and statistically significant decrease in the transmissibility.
I want to ask you about another drug, Virazole, which is not yet on the market, but its manufacturer believes that from the tests that it has taken, that people who have the virus but have not yet developed AIDS may not develop AIDS if given this drug. Is that your feeling?
That's the claim, and that's what apparently the data has shown. That drug is called ribavirin. We're right now in the process of being able to study larger numbers of individuals to establish whether that is in fact a fact.
Well, how long will it take you? I mean, as George said a moment ago, what is safe if you're dying of AIDS?
Well, that will take a matter of several months at least to determine that, perhaps even a half a year to a year.
But a lot of people will presumably get AIDS who have the virus now that might have been prevented from getting it. Does that make sense?
Well, it does make sense, because what you're dealing with, if you have a drug that's widely distributed in a situation in which its safety has not been established, there always is the possibility you will do much more harm than good. And that's something that really needs to be considered.
Now, Doctor, I read there is a new virus, a new viral strain that also leads to AIDS. The vaccine you are pursuing, if it turns out to be effective, would it be effective against the virus we now know as well as against the new one, or can you say?
The new one you're referring to is a strain of virus that has been isolated in Africa, particularly West Africa. It is likely, we don't know 100%, that if a vaccine is effective against one, it might not be effective against another. But right now, there is no evidence at all that this other virus has any impact at all in the United States, either infection or disease.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being with us, Doctor.
You're welcome.
Coming next, Faye Wattleton, president of the Planned Parenthood Federation of America, and Connaught Marshner of the Child and Family Protection Institute, and shortly, the executive director of the Colorado Department of Health and the chairman of a House subcommittee on health. In a moment.
Busy cooks want good food that's easy to prepare. I.C. Industries is there. Our food company, Pet, makes Downy Flake waffles, Old El Paso Mexican foods, Progresso Italian foods, and Pet Ritz pie shells. I.C. Industries. Americans drink more soft drinks than coffee, tea, or water. I.C. Industries is there. Our soft drink company, Pepsi-Cola General Bottlers, supplies Pepsi products to over 17 million people in the Midwest. I.C. Industries.
When investors wanted to reduce the high risk and high tech, Prudential Bates created Prutech 1 and 2.
This has real potential.
Select portfolios built on identifying promising products and companies on the leading edge of scientific frontiers.
This new process is incredible.
A first of its kind for the personal investor and a way to share in the growth available through technologies.
All right, let's go.
If anyone can show you a more advanced approach towards new and better ways to make money, it's Prudential Bates. Rock solid, market-wise.
This Week with David Brinkley will continue in a moment.
The most talked about television event of the season. One of the most powerful motion pictures you may ever experience. Starting tonight, this is America.
Spending on education? I don't call it spending, it's investing in our community. Join me in investing in Iowa schools. It's our investment in Iowa.
Enter the world of homegrown humor on the next entertainment this week.
Come on in, guys.
Lisa Gibbons takes you on the VIP tour at home with Gary Shandling.
You are a snob.
No, it's designed to be that way.
Then Leonard Maltin looks at Hollywood's real top guns, the filmmakers and films that champion the cause of peace. Plus, Gene Simmons moves in on Perry Mason, and Paul Young moves up the charts when you enter the world of
entertainment this week. Sunday nights at 11 on 5 TV.
Harry, stop trying to do your taxes all by yourself.
Harry, we called the IRS and found out there's a tax aid program right down the street, so come on.
Oh, come on, let's go.
We should tell him it's free.
It's free.
Call your local IRS office and ask for the tax aid program nearest you.
This is your TV station, 5 TV.
Mrs. Wattleton in Denver and Ms. Marshner here in Washington, thank you both very much for coming in today. Pleased to have you with us. Now, Ms. Wattleton, you're head of Planned Parenthood. If people are sufficiently frightened with all of this talk of AIDS and the terrible results of an AIDS infection, won't there be a decline in parenthood and perhaps none at all?
I doubt that there will be a decline in parenthood. I think that people are much more thoughtful about their sexual partners and their sexual practices. I think that's the role that Planned Parenthood now must play in terms of its education role as it counsels people on their parenting. We have long concerned ourselves with sexually transmitted diseases, and of course the specter of AIDS raises a very important question for many of our clients.
Ms. Marshner, if you were asked how to educate people about this problem, how would you do it?
Well, first of all, you can call me Mrs., by the way. I prefer that. The only kind of education that is going to do any good is going to be a straightforward, simple message that abstinence before marriage and exclusive faithfulness to the partner within marriage is the only way to avoid AIDS. I mean, that really is the only route to have peace of mind about AIDS. Because everything that we've been hearing, whether you're heterosexual or homosexual, you are still at risk of getting it from one of the ways known to be transmitted or one of the uncertain ways to be transmitted. The only way to be safe is to simply have sex with one exclusive partner.
But Mrs. Marshner, if I may, that you can't repeal human nature, can you? You know as well as I do that what you have said is not the practice of people from age 14 to 70, 80.
Well, I think that first of all, there's a whole lot of overestimation of what are indeed the levels of sexual activity among young people. I think that probably something closer to 20% of young people only, as opposed to the 50, 60 or more percent that we're often told or given the impression of. I mean, when you look at the way that the figures are derived for where young people are sexually active or how many of them are sexually active, the studies that have been done in the recent study that the Harris poll that the Planned Parenthood did, if you had had one sexual encounter in your life, you were deemed to be sexually active.
But it only takes one to get AIDS. Ms. Wattleton, let me ask you, I take it that you want to see the use of condoms promoted and advertised on television. Is that correct?
We have taken a very strong position that we believe that contraceptives should be advertised on television, condoms being one of the major products that is now in consideration.
Ms. Wattleton, how do you respond to the charge that conservatives make, and perhaps Mrs. Marshner will make it on her own, which is this, that in the advertisement of things such as condoms and other contraceptive devices, there's a kind of subliminal communication that amounts to capitulation, that you're encouraging people to go ahead and be sexually active, just telling them to be prudent, and that there's a kind of missing moral message here. How do you respond to that argument?
Well, I think there's no evidence that encouraging people to consider prevention and responsible sexual practices is any more likely to create promiscuity than some of the more explicit sexual presentations that we see on television and in the mass media. Our position is that we live in a sexual society. We do have sexual presentations, and we're bombarded by it on a daily, hourly basis. So why should we not consider the issues of prevention and responsible sexual practices? Why is that the element that would be considered the trigger to encourage promiscuity when in fact sexual explicitness apparently does not? Our view is that people should have a prevention mentality, that people should consider seriously the issue of their sexuality and should not engage in sexual relationships without considering prevention.
Well, but what you're talking about there is a technological solution to a problem that is cultural or personal or psychological. I mean, the people get into the relationships and they get into having sex for reasons other than technological, and you're simply proposing a technological band-aid to prevent any consequences from it. And the technological band-aid doesn't work in the first place, but in the course of not working, it also is extremely deceitful and is positively threatening to the public health.
Well, Mrs. Marshner, I think that we are not proposing a technological band-aid. I think we're proposing that the American people have the capacity to decide for themselves what their moral standards will be and what their ethical views will be.
They do not have that capacity if nobody is encouraging them and telling them.
If I may, I believe that the American people do have the ability to decide what their moral and their cultural standards will be. Our view, however, is that what those decisions are should not be taken in isolation of the consideration of prevention. We should not withhold prevention and the methods of prevention as a way of cowering people into conforming to a particular standard of morality.
Mrs. Marshner, before you...
Yes, well, could I just say something on that? I mean, condoms don't prevent anything. In a study in The Lancet last year, in the course of anal sex, which is not all that uncommon, 50% of the condoms broke. Now, that's not any kind of prevention. That's just deceiving people. That's giving false hopes. That's giving a false sense of security.
Now, but Mrs. Marshner, isn't that an argument for better condoms? I mean, Dr. Koop...
No, it's not an argument for better condoms,
well, just a second.
People aren't going to use them.
Dr. Koop, who is nobody's irresponsible physician, I think you'll admit, and would be described as a cultural conservative by any standards, says, A, they're safe, B, next to abstinence, which we cannot legislate and cannot count on, they are the best proposal. Are you saying that that Dr. Koop and the Reagan administration backing Dr. Koop are somehow violating a kind of conservative canon here? What specifically, aside from your claim that they're unsafe, is wrong with spreading the word about condoms?
Well, don't take Dr. Koop out of context. He began, and his main point is that abstinence is the best course. But if you're going to go ahead anyhow, then go ahead and use condoms. It's sort of like saying, we wish you wouldn't smoke, but if you're going to have to smoke, go ahead and smoke a low-tar cigarette. I mean, it's not advocating smoking, you know, it's not advocating that this is going to happen.
But Mrs. Marshner, people are going to go ahead. They are going to go ahead, are they not? You're not going to bring back chastity belts.
There would be a whole lot of people who would think twice or three or four times and who well might not go ahead if they were getting any encouragement for that viewpoint from the mass media, from their sex educators, from Planned Parenthood, etc. That kind of message is not being given out. I mean, the message that's being given out is, hey, it's simple to have safe sex, just use a condom. But it is not that simple. Nobody is saying, listen, you can be abstinent. We encourage you to be abstinent. It's better, it's safer. You'll be happier anyhow.
Ms. Wattleton?
Certainly, I don't believe that there is anyone who teaches promiscuity or irresponsible sexuality. I think that most every sexuality program that I am aware of, certainly the position of Planned Parenthood, is that abstinence is indeed a viable decision that people can make. I think it's also remarkable that Mrs. Marshner compares cigarette smoking with sex. Sex is a very important and very fundamental human drive and need. And we must recognize that as an American people, we are very hung up about this issue. And we must not envelop it in a cloak of fear and recriminations. We must recognize that education, responsible decision-making is the far more enlightened approach to take. And other countries have done it. Why in 1987 do Americans continue to want to look to a backward approach to their sexuality? It just simply is not viable.
Ms. Wattleton and Mrs. Marshner, our time is up. Our time is up. I want to thank you both for coming in today and for an extremely interesting discussion. It's been a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Coming next, Dr. Thomas Vernon, Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Health, and Representative Henry Waxman, Democrat, California, Chairman of a House Subcommittee on Health. In a moment.
America's Civil Rights Years, 1954 to 1965. The people, the struggle, the court battles and street fights, the marches, the dream. The decade that changed America. An extraordinary new television series, Eyes on the Prize, made possible in part by GE. Watch this week on PBS.
Organ transplants are a modern miracle.
Let's close. Good thing we found a donor. Can you believe there's a time when people wouldn't even talk about donating organs?
But the need is still critical. That's why Dow is funding a major educational effort to encourage organ donation.
Mrs. Simpson, Jenny is doing fine. She's a brave little girl.
Mount Everest, the ultimate climbing challenge. Sports today.
Dr. Vernon and Congressman Waxman, thank you both very much for coming in today. Happy to have you with us. Now, the Americans are skeptical people, which I think is one of our charms. And I have the impression that a great many believe this is one more sensation without substance, that it's media hype, that it's not as bad as it has been made to appear. I would like to have your thoughts on that. Dr. Vernon?
It's not media hype. We're talking about the biggest thing this nation has faced, at least since the Spanish influenza, in terms of the number of cases which are going to occur. That's not to say that we know exactly what is going to happen in the heterosexual population in the next several years, but we do know that we have perhaps approaching 2 million people already infected. Perhaps 50% of them are going to have this disease and die from it.
Mr. Waxman?
Well, we're certainly facing a horrible tragedy taking place right in front of our very eyes. The cases have doubled every year. 2 million people may be infectious, spreading that disease even further, and the statistics are really very, very frightening. More people will die of AIDS by 1990 than died in the whole Vietnam War.
Even in the freest societies, gentlemen, there's been a tendency to cause civil liberties to yield when there were public health considerations, such as quarantining people who have an infectious disease. How should we test, consistent with civil liberties, but also consistent with a disease of the scale you've just described? How should we test, who should we test, and what should the consequences of the testing be? Why don't you start, Congressman?
I think our first consideration has to be public health, stopping the spread of this epidemic. Therefore, we need to take measures that will be effective in that objective. The first objective should be to encourage people to go in and be tested voluntarily if they have some suspicion that they may have AIDS.
But if I may interrupt, there are places where people have to come. You have to get a marriage license. You have to apply for jobs. Places like that. Should we have mandatory places where the system intersects them and makes them be tested?
Well, we may well. And that's being discussed right now at the Centers for Disease Control, and the Public Health Service may make recommendations along those lines. But I'm convinced that if we want people to cooperate
and come in and be tested and not drive this whole disease underground, we've got to protect the confidentiality of that information. Otherwise, if someone volunteers to be tested and they have a positive blood test, they may not have AIDS and they may never get AIDS. They could lose their jobs, lose their insurance, lose everything. Well, so we have to protect the confidentiality if we're going to encourage voluntary testing and if we move toward a routine mandatory testing as well.
Mr. Vernon, would you respond to that, and would you address this question also? Someone comes in and he's tested and he's an AIDS carrier. Where do his rights end and the rights of the people he may previously have infected begin, and the people they may infect? That is, he can say, well, I don't want people to know about this, and we can say, I'm sorry, they have to.
The heart of that issue, Mr. Well, is confidentiality. To the extent that we can maintain and must maintain the confidentiality of records of the disease itself and of the antibody test, we can balance that critical tension between protections of individual liberties and privacy on the one hand and protection of the public health on the other. Public health has been doing that literally for decades with syphilis, gonorrhea, tuberculosis, 50 or so different communicable diseases. But the maintenance of that confidentiality is the key. You place confidential information in the hands of skilled public health epidemiologists, you can do something substantial to help slow the spread of this epidemic.
Let me
you know better.
Go ahead, Doctor.
You know better how the epidemic is spreading and to whom. You can guarantee quality counseling to individuals who might not otherwise come in for the counseling. And very important, by contacting those individuals, those cases confidentially, you can encourage them to notify their sexual contacts, or they can ask you to help them do so.
What are the dimensions of the testing that you're thinking about? For instance, Mr. Waxman, should we pass a law requiring everyone in the United States between certain ages to have this test?
I think that would be very foolish. We've got 2 million people out of a nation of 240 million that are infectious at the present time. It seems to me that we need to be more prudent as to who we ought to screen
then who do we test?
To have the disease.
Who do we test?
Well, first of all, voluntarily, we've asked people who are in a high-risk group to come in and be tested. Now you have serious questions. Should we test for marriage licenses?
I'm asking you. I mean, well, I know the questions are there. I want your answer.
Yes. I don't have an answer. I think the public health people have to give us the answers where they think will be most effective, but nobody in the public health arena thinks that testing everybody would make any sense.
Dr.
They're
Vernon?
talking about isolated situations where it might be prudent to have routine tests, and that's a decision they'll be making and advising us very soon.
Dr. Vernon, who should we test?
I agree with Congressman Waxman, first of all, that mandatory testing is an issue that has been blown completely out of proportion in the last couple of weeks. It is a decision which should be made epidemiologically. If and when there is a prevalence of this infection in the population who get married, then we would have a reason to proceed with testing in that group. But for the same reason that we, at least in Colorado, stopped syphilis testing 10 years ago, there is now no reason to do syphilis testing for, AIDS testing for premarital licenses now. This is a time when across this country we're not even yet testing adequately in the sexually transmitted disease clinics.
So I gather what both of you are telling me is that while testing is something you want to think about, you are both against moving forward now, except on a voluntary basis, to any mandatory testing. Is that right? Mr. Waxman?
Until we get further recommendations from the public health people who are going to be studying that and coming up with recommendations, I'm hesitant to say we ought to go for mandatory testing of any sort on a routine basis.
And Dr. Vernon, how many people would become infected with AIDS, do you imagine, that might have been saved had we had this kind of testing?
I do not believe, again, that there is the public health epidemiologic indication for mandatory testing in those groups that we can so easily get our hands on, and obviously that's premarital. The question of mandatory testing among the high-risk population has overbalanced against it the problem of driving that population away from us so that we, in fact, would have less contact with them than if we were to stay on the track we're on now, which is encouraging voluntary testing where the results are confidential.
Mr. Waxman, in your district, the 24th, your district covers Hollywood and adjacent areas, and there is a fairly substantial homosexual community in your district. Have they changed their way of living and behaving, would you say?
The records indicate that for other sexually transmitted diseases, there's been a dramatic drop. And so the public health people tell us, I don't know about my district specifically, but among the gay community, the lifestyle changes have been dramatic. They know people dying from AIDS. They know the consequences of continuing on in a promiscuous way. So we've seen changes in lifestyle. What worries me with the heterosexual population is that it would be a tragedy if they have to wait until they know people dying of the disease before they understand they've got to take precautions to stop the spread of AIDS. People have to be responsible for themselves and not rely on government to identify those people that have the disease and in some way protect them from those individuals. That one of your people this morning said, when you go to bed with someone and have sex with them, you're not having sex with that individual, but everyone that individual had sex with for the last 5 years. That's a very frightening and sobering thought when we're talking about a fatal disease.
Well, on a frightening, sobering thought, our time is up. And Congressman Waxman and Dr. Vernon, thank you both very much. It's been a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Coming next, our discussion here of whatever comes up, and joining us will be Bob Maynard, editor of the Oakland, California Tribune. In a moment.
Come on, admit it. It was a great shot. For a beginner. Beginner, 2 out of 3, pal. 2 out of 3.
I think you're still trying to get even because I have the higher grade point average.
Yeah, and as I recall, the lower starting salary.
Yeah, but at the hottest shop in town.
Yeah, as an assistant to an assistant.
Oh, okay. So who was first as a vice president?
And last with a corner office.
But if I can land the North Bay project?
Yeah?
I'm talking senior partnership.
Really? How's it look?
You tell me.
What a production. You guys must have had outside help on this one.
No way. We put the whole thing together ourselves.
Come on.
No, really. We did everything on our computer.
Revenue projections, impact studies?
Everything.
So, what kind of computer?
Whoa, I'm running late.
Come on, what kind of computer?
Sometimes getting car financing turns out to be one long hassle.
What kind of car did you have in mind?
A Fiero.
Oh, an Italian car.
It's a Pontiac from General Motors.
They make Chevrolets, Oldsmobiles, Buicks, Cadillacs.
GMC trucks.
This is none of my business, but those are not Italian cars.
Make it easy on yourself. Finance your car or truck right at your GM dealer with GMAC.
You understand, we do have to know what you want to do with all these cars.
Nobody knows more about financing and leasing cars than GMAC.
Over the last 2 decades, one private research agency has led the fight for auto safety. Through exhaustive testing and thorough analysis, they've helped make the inside of an automobile a safer place for all of us.
Okay, hold it right there.
Who created and funded this agency?
That's it.
You're going to be surprised. Your insurance company. We do a lot more than sell insurance.
The thing about this job is trying to keep ahead of it.
God, it's only 2.
Not just 24 hours ahead of it, but sometimes 6 months ahead.
But he wants me to do something.
Because there will always be something every day that will surprise you. And one of the things you try not in the news business is to be surprised.
Peter Jennings on ABC's World News Tonight.
Now, this has no particular connection, and maybe very little at all, to the previous topic. But one of the unhappy facts of life in this country is that as people get older and as people get sick and have various serious and prolonged illnesses, they not only wind up sick, they wind up broke, bankrupt. Almost nobody has enough money to pay for weeks, months, years in hospitals and nursing homes. So the topic of serious discussion in Washington this week is catastrophic health insurance. You pay a little bit a month, $5 or so, I think it is. And then if you need it, government will pay. George, what do you think of this?
Well, it's fascinating that Ronald Reagan, if this passes, and I think it will, indeed it will pass in a form expanded significantly beyond what he's proposing, will leave Washington with one of his monuments being a substantial enlargement of the welfare state. Now, I think there's a good conservative reason for this. I keep telling my conservative friends that two conservatives, Disraeli and Bismarck, in the 19th century helped invent the welfare state. Nothing incompatible with this, but the president said this is the chief remaining source of terrible random insecurity in the lives of Americans. They face the choice, many elderly, of being broke or being dead, and a civilized, wealthy society won't do that. Now, they're going to have to pony up $4.92 extra a month. So we say. The one thing we know about medical costs is, David, they're running inflation in that sector is about 8 times what it is in the rest of the population, and that we consistently, indeed invariably, underestimate the cost of the new technologies and the new care. Kidney dialysis is a great example. So we're almost certainly underestimating the cost of this, but we're also clearly understanding the political appeal of it.
George is right. This president has now said that government is the answer, which I think he's correct in saying in this case, because he's organizing under Medicare more help, hospitalization, and doctor bills for acute illness for people who couldn't pay for it. And Dr. Otis Bowen, who is the Secretary of Health and Human Services, a little-known fellow from Indiana who was a former governor, has beaten 3 of the top conservatives in this administration, Meese, Miller, and Sprinkle, for the heart and mind of Ronald Reagan. Now, I don't want to push this too far. I don't think that Ronald Reagan is going to suddenly want an arms control treaty with the Russians or do anything else that will offend his conservative constituency. But in this case, the rule of reason has applied, and I compliment him. Well, Congress, of course, will add to this, because health care in nursing homes is not covered in the president's proposal.
That's right. It's a limited proposal. It's a good beginning and an opening to what is going to be an enormous program in due course. Simply, if you look at the demographics of the United States and recognize that our population is aging, that the baby boom generation is in early 40s now, and you look at what that means in terms of the devastating effect of catastrophic illness. If you have a wage earner who's 41, whose mother is 65, and whose son is 17, and the mother gets a disease that is catastrophic in the terms of which we mean long-term care, that could very well be a catastrophe for 3 generations. It's a catastrophe for the grandparent, it's a catastrophe for the parent who's got to manage it, and for the kid of that parent who may not get to go to college because grandmom's got to
because his grandmother's in a nursing home.
But you know, some Treasury money may go into this next phase.
Well,
the president's plan
the argument is
for
to get into the general fund, and I'm sure George would be among those who would be the first to lead the charge against doing that, but I don't see how we're going to avoid that.
Before I ask George to respond to that, at the moment, under Schedule B of Medicare, people may pay some $17 for the basic coverage. Now the president proposing you pay another $4.92 for this catastrophic coverage. So that brings it up over $20. If you now add another $5 or more, I suppose, because the long-term nursing care actually costs more in the aggregate than acute illness at the moment.
1 in 5 of the elderly is going to need custodial care, not hospital care, but custodial care at some point.
Well, should the general public pay for this, George?
No, I think to the extent possible, it should be paid. You should have a kind of user paying, and most of the elderly are going to use this. That is, almost all of the elderly are going to be seriously ill and hospitalized before they die. Well, the elderly population is not below the national average in terms of wealth, as a matter of fact. We are a fairly generous, properly so, society in providing a guaranteed retirement for the elderly. That's a welfare decision we made in this country with a broad consensus 50 years ago.
You can't live on Social Security, George?
No, most of the elderly are not. Most of the elderly own their own homes. Most of the elderly are simply not.
Is it going to be, a lot of government programs are less than you think them to be. Is it going to be, I know we don't know all the details yet, but is it going to be that the elderly have to impoverish themselves before the government will begin paying?
That is the circumstance now under Medicare. Right. Where in order to go beyond a certain point, you wind up having to impoverish yourself, and that is exactly...
Sell your house.
Sell your home, sell all your assets, and so forth, in order to qualify.
Under the president's program, as I understand it, for hospital care, and again, we have to underscore that because it's not covering nursing homes yet, but under hospital care, the individual would be responsible only for $2,000 out-of-pocket expenses in a given year.
That's correct.
In a given year.
That's right.
The problem is we have...
Does everyone agree that nursing home inevitably will be included before it's all done?
Absolutely. I think this bill will pass this year, but with the modification that all of us seem to agree on. Nursing homes will be included, but I doubt that we'll simply up the ante for the elderly. I think there's going to be some general Treasury money.
But again, David, to look ahead to the future that Bob was talking about, today we have a few states like Florida with an extremely high portion of the population above 65. In another 20 years, the percentage of the population nationwide, 65 or older, is going to be that which it is in Florida today. So it's coming in a big hurry.
So there's another aspect, very, very quickly, David, and that's the control over the cost, the rate at which the cost of care is rising, and the need to look at the whole issue of physicians' fees as well as hospital costs and so forth. That's going to obviously require a great deal more scrutiny.
Well, this program is indexed. Let's keep in mind the president's proposing that as the costs rise, inflation in medical care, so will that premium of $4.92. So will that cap of $2,000.
Absolutely. One question before we go on. It's, what is it now, $4? What would it be under the present bill? $4.92. What would you guess, not allowing for inflation, what would you guess it'll be in 10 years?
Not allowing for inflation. Well, not allowing for inflation, I'd say double, but I'd say we'll get 4 times that in 10 years.
Allowing for inflation, it'll be 4 times, $20. Sam, what would you guess?
I can't, but I agree it'll be much higher, because medical costs have been going up 9% a year.
Yes, yes. It's certainly one of the keys here is going to be to slow the rate at which medical costs grow, but I agree with George.
We have social programs now. Medicaid, for example, and members of Congress have told me that if they had any idea the cost is going to be what it is, they would never have passed it. But that's history. This week, Robert McFarlane, Bud McFarlane, formerly of the White House staff, formerly of the National Security Council, overdosed on Valium. He's been on our program numerous times. Overdosed on Valium and either was or was not trying to commit suicide is not clear. Sam, you covered him in the White House, and since, what's your judgment?
Well, I think it's a tragic thing that's happened to McFarlane. He apparently feels responsible for having brought to Ronald Reagan the original idea, transmitted from the Israelis, of course, to sell arms to Iran, and one of the purposes being to get back hostages. In the initial weeks after this story broke, David, McFarlane was part of what I think was an attempt to cover it up. He was on our program, as you just noted, and on our program when we asked him specifically whether the president had condoned the information, or rather condoned the first shipment, and told him the chief of staff said he had, McFarlane said, well, it doesn't square with my recollection. Later, however, he testified before Congress that the president had done that. So here is a man in turmoil, and I think he was just sort of crying out for some help when he apparently took an overdose of Valium.
There is a way in which you can see some of those White House staff people as hostages in this situation themselves. They became so obsessed with getting back the hostages that they almost became hostages themselves. But the National Security Council is a place that I am told should be distinguished from a daycare center in that daycare centers require adult supervision, and apparently that was not always required at the NSC. And as a result, a lot of control just simply was not there. Interestingly enough, the cover-up to which Sam referred, which has almost certainly occurred, may have involved the destruction of hard copy of computer messages that nonetheless remained in a backup mode in the NSC computers. So they may have spent a great deal of time destroying hard copy only to have the actual computer files wind up in the hands of the Tower Commission, as apparently has occurred.
George, what do you think?
Well, on Bud McFarlane, I just wish him well. I mean, it's a reminder, and it's timely, that the people who get caught up in these passionate enterprises in Washington are, after all, flesh and blood human beings. And there's a tendency, I think, for us all to practice psychiatry without a license. I don't know what made him do it, and I just hope he gets well.
Another related question is, we, of course, won World War II without a National Security Council. We have not really won a war since then, which is not altogether the question. Do we need a National Security Council? Why do we have to have this substantial bureaucracy inside the White House?
We need some apparatus to bring to the president the competing views of his bureaucracy in the State Department, in the Defense Department, in the U.S. Arms and Control Agency, for instance, if you're talking about one particular topic. President, even the most assiduously dedicated president, doesn't have the time to do all of that. And that's why the National Security Council was was arranged not to practice activity.
Isn't it inevitable, Sam, that a body set up to mediate between A and B goes into business for itself?
Oh, of course. The best ones, though, have been honest brokers. The worst ones of national security advisors, in my opinion, have been people who have their own agenda and push their own agenda to the president. Because the president always listens to the guy whose office is down the hall, not the one who hangs his hat across town.
Well, that's right, but I think the president can put some limits on the degree to which the National Security Council becomes an agency that goes into business for itself. This is an anomaly to permit this degree of latitude to be exercised by people without any accountability.
Well, Oliver North, the president called him a national hero. He's clearly, in my view, become a national disaster. What he was doing down there subverted not only the president's program to some extent and the laws, but the whole idea of a responsible government.
We got 45 seconds. The Democrats have chosen to hold their nominating convention in Atlanta, the Republicans in New Orleans. Is this a good idea, George?
Well, it's an idea whose time has come and passed and come again, that they recognize that they can't win without the South. In 3 of the last 5 elections, David, the Democrats had no Southerner on the ticket, either at the top or the bottom. That means they ran 3 times in the 11 states of the old Confederacy. They won Texas once. In other words, they won 1 state and lost 32.
Sam, we got 15
interested to find out
seconds.
how the Democrats going to handle the fact that they'll be in Atlanta and Jimmy Carter and Burt Lance will be in the hall with them. I'm not so certain that's a terrific idea.
Well, one of the things about
We'll have to wait and see. I'm sorry, Bob. Thank you. Our time is up.
Right.
Thanks very much. We'll be back with a few words about those who agree with our traditional teaching that honesty is the best policy, and a great many who don't, in a moment.
Japan is buying American food store technology. I.C. Industries is there. Our refrigeration company, Hussmann, equips food stores in 80 countries around the world, including 1,000 in Japan. I.C. Industries. Aerospace is a $100 billion market and climbing. I.C. Industries is there. Our aerospace company, Pneumo ABEX, produces flight controls and landing gear for most of the free world's aircraft. I.C. Industries.
To all you students of innovation, to you inspired to try what's never been tried before, to all those consumed with an insatiable curiosity, a penchant for ingenuity, to you who seek and search and blaze new trails, who try and fail and try again, to all you children of imagination, you sons and daughters and mothers of invention, dreamers and doers, thinkers and tinkerers all, we at General Electric salute you. For as advanced as our technology has become, we've never forgotten that from small beginnings, big ideas grow.
Finally, we've all been taught that honesty was the best policy. Well, a new poll done for U.S. News, World Report, and CNN shows that 54% of the American people agreed that honesty was indeed the best. Well, 54% is not exactly an overwhelming vote for honesty. So what do the other 46% think? We don't know. We're not told. Furthermore, they were asked what people and professions they trusted the most, and they said they trusted, for one, television anchor people. Well, all right, but they don't deserve much credit for honesty because they don't have any choice. 60% said they trusted their wives and their husbands. Only 60%. The other 40%, I guess, thought they were like people in soap operas, out lying and cheating. And finally, they said they trusted automobile repairmen at 40%, more than they trusted President Reagan at 38%. Now, what does that mean? How do they know? How many of them have ever had President Reagan fix their carburetors? For all of us at ABC's This Week, until next Sunday, thank you.
This Week with David Brinkley, brought to you by General Electric. At GE, we bring good things to life. And by Apple Computer. If you wish a printed transcript of this or any other This Week with David Brinkley broadcast, please send $3 to This Week with David Brinkley, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038. This Week with David Brinkley is a presentation of ABC News.
Hi, I'm Joan London. This week, a special Good Morning America. As we say goodbye to David Hartman, we'll remember the early days, some of David's memorable interviews, and trips to fascinating places. Relive 11 remarkable years as we say goodbye to David this week on Good Morning America.
Round and round it goes.
If you drove a Volvo 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year for 3 years, you'd still be covered by Volvo's 3-year unlimited mileage warranty. Of course, Volvo doesn't stop there.
Where it stops, nobody knows.
Volvo, a car company you can believe in.
Select your new Volvo now at Dave Ostrom Imports, Des Moines Automotive Showcase.
Each Monday at 10 on 5 TV's Iowa News Tonight, consumer reporter Jessica Semmler presents an